All right, Kevin, back with you for another edition of the $1 Million Relationships podcast. And today I am here with Jason Hewlett. Jason, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show, man.
So awesome to be with you. This is awesome to be a part of this, my brother.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what makes this so cool is this is our first time ever talking with each other. But because we have this mutual friend in Mike Domish, it's like you and I just connect because we got this awesome mutual friend that we both have in common here. And it's like we've known each other forever just because of that alone. And that is yet another testament to the power of relationships.
I love it. Yeah, Mike Domish, one of the greats. And if your listeners, viewers don't know him, obviously you've interviewed him, and he's one of the greats, one of the Hall of Fame speaker, somebody who's been featured on all kinds of publications. He's done amazing things for keeping people safe and making sure that everybody knows the boundaries and the lines not to cross. He's one of the greats of all time. He talks about respect, and he wrote a great book called Can I Kiss You? And he has lots of things in the works that he's putting together. So mutual love for a great man.
Well, and I will, also a different side of my, because I've had opportunity to be in the audience when he was here in my local area to watch him do his magic, which was really cool. Yeah. And also, I've had the opportunity. I hired him as a coach, and I worked with him for a year. He coached me in speaking because I was wanting to get into doing more public speaking, and so I got to experience that as well, which was pretty dang awesome.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know you did that with him. That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, you couldn't hire a better guy. I agree. Well done.
I will totally agree with you on that. That guy is a wealth of knowledge and insight for sure. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of start, Jason, by turning it over to you and letting you share a little bit of your background, what you do, who you serve, what inspires you about the work that you get to do. And we'll just set a little bit of context and let the listeners know, who is Jason Hewlett and what are you all about, Jason?
Well, thank you, my friend. The person that I am, I've become a keynote speaker for corporate events as well as community events, which I get to do one this very day for parents and families coming together to learn more about not forgetting their promise. I call it Don't Forget Your Promise, as well as just simply the promise. And so I've been talking for years about what is the power of making a promise and keeping it. And I've been doing that for, I'd say 6 or 7 years with that topic of promises. And then before that, I started as a performer, an entertainer. And so I was in Las Vegas as a musical impressionist. And there are very few of those out there that have ever made a living doing that. And so what that means is I would blast between the Bee Gees and Louis Armstrong and Elvis and Elton John and do different impressions that made people laugh, but it was always family friendly. That was my calling card, my signature move. And so I have done that for over 20 years for a living. Wow. And so my career has been really cool in terms of bringing entertainment into a keynote style presentation. And there are very few that do an entertaining keynote. Although you've seen Mike Domish, he's very funny. He's very engaging with the audience. Everyone has that which makes them unique as a speaker. And I found mine to be doing entertainment. And so what allows me to do is go around the world and speak to thousands of people at a time. Sometimes there's smaller groups, but normally it's at least 1,000 or more. And that's my sweet spot. That's my favorite thing to do, is to inspire leaders. I believe that every person is a leader and can become a legendary leader, but we just need to discover our signature moves. And that's, our talents, our gifts, that which makes us different. And that allows us to then keep the promise to share it with the world. Because if we know what it is, that which makes us unique, and we don't share it, we're breaking the promise. And so that's kind of the roundabout way as to how I share what I do. It's about commitment. It's about leadership. It's about authenticity. And it's actually kind of funny, Kevin, if you think about the fact that I'm doing musical impressions to help people discover their own voice. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I impersonate other people to help you identify, clarify, and magnify your signature moves and your promise. And so it's been a fun thing to do. And I have 4 children, a lovely wife. We're in the teenage years right now. And so for any of your listeners that are familiar with that time of life, it is crazy and we love it. We're certainly in the thick of it. But yeah, that's me, man. And anything else I missed?
Well, so you did a great job of covering that, Jason, and I just got to point out, I'm right there with you. I've got 7 kids. 4 of them are grown and out of the house and have children of their own, but I've also got 3 teenagers right along with you.
Wow. Well done, man. I need to take lessons from you.
Well, we finally figured out what was causing that. So, I mean, I'm just curious, I just from what you just shared, Jason, it is completely clear that you are just really excited about the work that you get to do and all that. What inspires you most about the work that you get to do, Jason?
Oh gosh, I'd say that anytime I stand in front of an audience, I know that they don't know who I am, and so I get to really give them something that they never thought they would experience. And what inspires me most is to think that by my sharing my own story and being willing to courageously step into this really kind of wacky performance speech that I'm about to give them, that will actually embolden them, give them courage to then go and discover their gifts and even rediscover their gifts that they haven't shared probably in their leadership position.
Yeah.
And just like I say, I think everybody is a leader in every position as long as we take ownership of it.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, it's fascinating to watch men come up after a speech or women come up after a presentation and say, "You have just given me the courage to go back to the drawer and pull out the gifts that I haven't shared in my employment. And I'm going to take this home as well and share it with my family." And I say, that's what this is about. You know, years ago, my friend, they would come up to me and say, "You're so funny. You're so great. You're so good." And that was not the response I wanted.
Yeah.
It's nice to get a standing ovation. It's nice for people to think you're great. I want them to think they're great.
Yeah.
And I want them to believe that they can learn enough within my 1-hour presentation that they go away saying, "I got this. I know what to do. I can make new promises and keep them. And that's going to change my life." That's what inspires me.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. You are making quite an impact in this world. I mean, so congratulations on that, Jason. That is awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shift gears a little bit and I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of all the listeners. So, have you ever been introduced to a person that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person? And Jason, I'm really excited to hear your story, your experience around this, as well as be able to give you the opportunity to honor somebody who's had such a profound impact on your life and on your business.
This is such a cool question. And I love that this is what your podcast is based around, because this allows us to celebrate heroes that we probably would never have known about. And so, well done. I get to, in my speech, share stories of people that have profoundly impacted my life. And I think that I have spoken about them so much that there is somebody I need to make sure to honor today in this special podcast. And his name is Chris Poulos. And Chris Poulos was Poulos. He was from Greece. And I met him when I was, I was 21 years old. And I had just gotten done with high school as an 18-year-old. And I went to Brazil to live for 2 years as a missionary. And I came home after 2 years thinking I had a full ride scholarship to a university, and I was thinking about going and using that. But then I met Chris Poulos, who was in his late 60s, if I recall.
Okay.
So I was in my early 20s. He was in his late 60s. And he and I met because of a friend who told me, if you're going to try to go into show business instead of going to college, you need to meet a guy who has done it before and who has helped others. And this man had managed the 3Ds, which was a group back in the 60s who used to open for people like Bill Cosby and other artists back in the day. And they were a singing group. And he had helped other people to enhance their talent. And so I remember meeting this fellow, Chris Paulus. I went to his house, which was, a nice house overlooking a mountainous view here in Utah where I live and he lived. And I walked in there as a 21-year-old, not knowing much about anything. And he asked me, he said, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I think I want to be a performer, a singer, an actor. I want to write books. I want to be a speaker. I want to do a lot of things." And he said, "Okay, well, show me what you got." And so I sat down at his piano and I played Billy Joel's Piano Man. "Sing us a song, you're the piano man. Sing us a song tonight." And he was like, "Whoa," because I started to play the harmonica with it. And he went, That's amazing. What else can you do?" And then I stood up and I started dancing like Michael Jackson. This was all in his living room, just for one person. It was very awkward. I was like, and I'm doing the moonwalk, and he's like, "Whoa." And then I did a velociraptor from Jurassic Park running through his house chasing Goofy from Disney. So I was like, "Ah!" And Goofy's like, "Oh, yep." And I was just doing all these silly, weird things that I had figured out as a kid for this person who I thought, if he believes in me, maybe he'll help me. And he looked at me and he said, "You're like Sammy Davis Jr." And no one had ever said that before, but Sammy Davis Jr. was my hero in terms of performing.
Wow.
That was a guy who could do everything. He could do music, impressions, do instruments, etc. And so he said, "I want to help you." And I said, "Well, I don't have any money." And he goes, "Well, this won't cost you anything. I'm just going to be your mentor." And I said, "Well, I think I need a manager." And he goes, "No, you need a mentor. And I'd like to help you to get this thing rolling." And so we sat and we philosophized, I would say, for hours at a time.
Okay.
I mean, it was a lot like Luke Skywalker with Yoda. I just sat there and asked him questions and he asked me questions, and we went back and forth about what entertainment looked like and what speaking and messaging might be. And he had been a professor at BYU, and that was a big thing for me to get to sit and talk to someone that was so smart. And so eventually he just said to me, "Hey, we need to get you on stage." I said, "What do I do?" He goes, "Come up with a good 10 or 15 minutes. And we put the show together. And I got on a stage. He put all my gigs together. He landed me. Everything that he got me was a miracle. And eventually, within a year, I was auditioning for a show in Las Vegas because of the mentorship of this man, Chris Paulus, who was in his late 60s. Didn't have any reason to do this. I mean, he was just being friendly and helpful. And he came with me to Las Vegas for the audition. I landed the audition. It was with the Legends in Concert show, which used to be at the Imperial Palace. It was the Legends in Concert are impersonators. And they asked me if I could do Ricky Martin. And Ricky Martin was the "Living La Vida Loca, upside, inside out, living La Vida." So I became Ricky Martin as an impersonator in Vegas. And the next thing I knew, I was also then added as an Elton John impersonator for them as well. So I would sing, "I remember when a rock was young, me and Susie had so much fun. La, 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 la." And so I got to be both of those artists for this really interesting show. And this man, Chris Paulus, was there from the very beginning of my career. It's now been 20 plus years since that started and that happened. I've, got married. I've had children. He was still there on a phone call or if I could go visit him. And he was just kind of my center. He was the place that I would come back to, who was the wise old sage. When I would ask questions like, "What should I do?" Here's a story for you that really knocks people out.
Okay.
There was a person at the Mirage named Danny Gans, who was a great musical artist and impressionist. He signed a $150 million contract a couple of years before I came on the scene. And what was interesting about Danny Gans is he had a really great show, and they were always looking for the next Danny Gans. And guess what? By 3, 4 years into my career, I was sitting across the table from the same hotel billionaire who gave Danny Gantz that contract. And he said, "Hey, you're the next Danny Gantz." And
Wow.
I was like, "Really?" I mean, I was only 25.
Mhm.
And he said, "All you have to do is sign this line here, and we're going to change your act to be something that fits more of the theme in Vegas," which at the time had just become what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. They needed me to change my act to fit their audience and to fit their need. But I had made a promise a long time ago that I would not bend to the requests that would alter that which I had created in order to just make money. And this was an opportunity of a lifetime, Kevin. If you think about it, I would have my name in lights. I'd be managed for a long time by these people. I would be going to another level. I remember sitting and talking with my wife and with Chris Polis. And Chris Polis looked at me and he said, "If you sign this thing, you're going to have to change everything we've worked towards with it being family friendly for children, for parents, for grandparents, all to come together. You can't do that anymore if you sign this contract." And it was true. They did not allow us to alter that contract. And so, would I be where I am today without Chris Polis? No way. When I walked away from that opportunity, and everyone said I was crazy and I was blacklisted from ever headlining again in Las Vegas, I said, at least I'm keeping the promise that I set out to at the beginning, which was to always make it so that families could enjoy it together. That philosophy was embedded in my mind when I met with every single day Chris Polis on his couch in his living room for free. And I remember asking him years later, I said, "Hey, how can I ever repay you?" And he said, "Well, all you have to do is do the same thing I've done for you. You just have to do it for others.
Yeah.
So help mentor people,
Yeah.
help give something back." And I've tried to do that as best as I can. Chris Polis passed away December of 2021 on Christmas Day.
Wow. Wow.
And he was 91 years old, and he was my best friend.
Yeah.
It's sad to lose your best friend on Christmas Day, but what a beautiful day for somebody with the name Chris to be able to leave on the day named Christmas, and to be able to honor that great man in this podcast with you is a wonderful blessing. So I appreciate that.
Wow. Wow. What an amazing story, Jason. And thank you so much for taking the time to share that. I mean, as I was listening to you share that, I saw so much of myself in that, because I too, I don't remember how many years it's been now, but where I personally just made the decision of, I am going to do what is in alignment with who I am and how I feel I'm meant to show up in this world. And has it cost me some opportunities? You bet it has. But by the same token, it's also opened up other doors as well that would have never been opened. And I really believe if more people need to hear that message, because we spend so much of our lives wondering what would other people think of us, or whatever, and reality is most people are too worried about wondering about what other people are thinking of them. They ain't thinking about us at all,
Yeah.
And so there is so much to be said for following your heart, following your vision, doing what we feel is in alignment with who we are and how we are meant to show up in this world. And so I want to thank you so much for just taking the time to share that, to be able to honor Chris. And, for anybody listening to this, that's just like, wow, Kevin, man, I really like Jason. I love the way Jason shows up. I love who he is. How can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing, Jason?
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. JasonHewlett.com is my website, but I'm really active on social media as well. We have the whole thing: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of those, YouTube. Just look up my name. If you can spell Hewlett Packard, Jason Hewlett, Hewlett. I did write a book and it's on Amazon. It's called The Promise to the One. And I believe that the one is you. And so, what are your promises to yourself that you've made to you that you're not going to break? The non-negotiables, the sacred goals, and that would be a wonderful place to connect as well. If your readers or your listeners, I mean, wanted to check out a good book. In fact, I have a part in the book called Mentors, and it's dedicated, of course, to Chris Polis, and I call the ability to mentor others the Chris Polis effect, because Chris Polis has exponentially affected millions of lives through me just by mentoring me on couch across couch in a living room. And I've had the chance to perform for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. But I've also now mentored some of the other great speakers and performers of this world. Now think of that. It reminds me of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
It reminds me that, each of us have the ability, if we're willing, to be like Chris Polis and make a difference to one person. That person could cumulatively make an effect on so many people across the world. And this man, Chris Polis, he had a phrase. He said, well, that's heavenly choreography. Heavenly choreography. As if it was divinely appointed for us to meet, to work together, to help one another. Yeah. And what an honor to get to work with a man that was righteous, that worked so hard for his family. He had a wonderful family. And I saw him and I said, I want to pattern my life after that. I want to have a marriage last that long. I want to stay in my faith that way. I want to show up every day and keep the promise to myself, to my God, to my family, to those I serve and love. And so I hope that if your listeners want to check out a book, The Promise to the One, it's a pretty cool read.
Awesome. Well, what a generous offer, and thank you so much for that. And I'll make sure I'm going to look up the link on Amazon for that, and I'll include that in the show notes as well for you. And any last thing you want to share before we call it a wrap, Jason?
I just hope that anybody listening that's thinking to themselves, oh man, I don't have a Chris Polis. I don't have somebody who's sat down with me, given the time or the effort to help me. Well, maybe let's say you do know that person. Okay, thank them, honor them, talk about them, share the story. But if you don't have that person, I might just bet that it's you. You might be that person that needs to start that cycle that can change the lives of other people. So with the inspiration of a story like Chris Polis helping someone like me who was an absolute nobody, wanting to just run around his house doing silly things, to then being on stages around the world performing for the parties of the billionaires, and then the next thing I know, I'm performing for the war in Afghanistan for the military, doing things of significance. Each of you as listeners have the opportunity to do that for somebody else if you're willing to just share what you know, share what you're great at. Your signature moves matter, and when you do that, you keep the promise.
Well, Jason, I want to thank you so much for taking time to have this conversation. The goal of this podcast has always been twofold: for you, the guest, to be able to share your story, your experience around this, and to honor somebody who has had such a profound impact on your life, which we've definitely done. And then on the other side, for the listeners, I just simply want to inspire them to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their lives. And we have definitely achieved that today. So thank you so much. Been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks again, Jason.
Thank you, my friend.